She vanished. Not just from the show, from everything. One day, Jasmine Pineda was all over 90 Day Fiancé, crying on camera, fighting with Gino, dominating season arcs and Instagram feeds. And then, silence. No goodbye post, no last scene, no dramatic send-off. She was simply gone, like a storyline wiped mid-sentence. Viewers waited for a reunion appearance, a tell-all, even a messy Instagram live. Nothing. Her absence didn't come with closure. It came with confusion. And when a silence is that loud, people start talking. Fans threw everything at the wall. Maybe she needed a break. Maybe producers edited her out after a final fight. Or maybe, and this is where whispers took a darker turn, it wasn't artistic differences. What if something legal was closing in? At first, Reddit and fan gossip pages were messy but chaotic in a harmless way. Some said she was pregnant and hiding it. Others joked she married someone else in secret. A few believed she got tired of being dragged online and pulled herself off the grid. But underneath the jokes, there was a pattern nobody could explain. Her brand sponsors went quiet. TLC stopped tagging her. All traces began disappearing like someone flipped a slow delete switch. And just as people got suspicious, a few insiders started saying the quiet part out loud. It wasn't burnout. It wasn't drama. It may have been immigration, quiet paperwork problems, legal red flags, compliance reviews behind the scenes, things that started long before her final episode, long before any fan noticed something was off. And thinking back, maybe the warning signs were always there. Jasmine wasn't just a cast member. She was a show for a lot of people. She burst onto screens like a firework you couldn't look away from. Loud, passionate, fearless. A one-woman emotional hurricane. She gave producers gold, tears, jealousy, chaos that walked a fine line between tragic and meme-worthy. But even in that chaos, something always felt raw instead of fake. And that's what made her unforgettable. Who else could cry, scream, flirt, spiral, and recover in the space of one scene? Who else could accuse Gino of cheating, then collapse into an apology, then pivot into threatening to leave, all within 3 commercial breaks? Jasmine didn't just act out, she lived out loud. And early on, TLC seemed ready to ride that wave forever. But now, looking back, that intensity starts to feel different. Not entertaining, not strategic, more like a collapse building in slow motion. Take this tiny moment, one that most fans blew past. Jasmine had flown in for what was supposed to be a romantic trip, Valentine's Day, a time for couples to connect, reset, maybe even propose. But Jasmine? She asked for separate hotel rooms. Not angrily, not dramatically, but with a soft sadness that landed differently. She said it broke her heart. Because even away from the cameras, Gino still kept his walls up. Viewers thought she meant emotional distance. But now, maybe it was physical separation. Or legal restrictions already starting to choke their options. Because that was long before her final episode aired. Long before the promos stopped including her. Long before her social media stopped making sense. And if that's when the heartbreak started, what came next was more than a breakup. It was a shutdown. But what if her on-screen meltdowns were only one side of what producers feared most? Inside those production trailers, Jasmine wasn't just another cast member. She was labeled early, high value, high risk, a goldmine with a fuse. One former crew member allegedly called her the best worst-case scenario. She gave TLC what they wanted, chaos that trended. Every season featuring Jasmine came with an automatic algorithm boost. Clips of her breakdowns hit millions before the full episodes dropped. She was a volatility machine that kept the show bubbling on Twitter, Reddit, TikTok. But what production loved on camera started to become a different story once the camera shut off. When you're filming reality TV, there's a line producers play with: controlled drama versus uncontrollable damage. And Jasmine allegedly danced on that line daily. Sharp Entertainment, the company behind 90 Day Fiancé, began flagging internal issues that the public never saw. Compliance problems, missed document deadlines, paperwork that didn't match, visa timelines that didn't line up with her shoot location, strange gaps between what she said in confessionals and what was logged in her travel declarations. Allegedly, contracts with Jasmine started getting more complicated. Lawyers started weighing in where talent managers used to sit. TLC's legal team reportedly began tagging her name in more internal memos, usually next to words like liability, review, and non-compliance. Not because of how she acted on TV, but because of everything that wasn't being handled off screen. And suddenly, the edits changed. Longtime fans noticed. Scenes that seemed to be teased in the promos never aired. Explosive clips got trimmed down, even blurred. Entire segments looked rearranged, not intentionally for storyline, but to sanitize what had already happened. Multiple insiders later hinted that the goal wasn't storytelling anymore. It was risk management. They weren't protecting Jasmine. They were protecting TLC. In one interview scene, Jasmine stormed out mid-confessional. The final cut made it look like a typical mood swing, but backstage chatter says it was bigger. She may have brought up legal threats, right as a producer tried resetting the next question. That footage was allegedly pulled, sliced, never aired. And one crew member said something haunting. "We stopped shooting her like a star. We started editing her like a lawsuit." Reality TV loves broken characters. But there's a difference between a character arc and a real-life collapse. One producer allegedly warned, "You can't build a season around someone who may not be legally allowed to appear by the time it airs." Think about that. That's not about cameras. That's legal concern. So they adapted. Cut scenes to reduce exposure. Pushed B-roll from other couples. Re-recorded voiceovers to fill emotional gaps. Behind the curtain, Jasmine was becoming unairable. And here's what no one tells you about filming people in emotional distress for primetime. When you pay someone to feel everything, nonstop, for years, at what point do they stop being in control of their feelings at all? Fans only see the final edit. But by the end, Jasmine wasn't improvising. She was unraveling inside a system that trained her to break big, loudly, and on cue. And once those breaks stopped fitting inside safe episode blocks, the meetings changed. Script planning stopped. Storyboards were scrapped. And the word risk became the storyboarding theme. And what happens when a show's biggest asset becomes its biggest liability? In reality TV, when a cast member leaves under normal conditions, you know it. There's a goodbye scene, a montage, maybe even a messy reunion chair throw to cap it off. But Jasmine didn't get a send-off, just a quiet vanishing act. And what people forget is, absence isn't always an accident. Sometimes it's engineered. Around her last appearance, things started slipping, not loudly, but noticeably. Her scenes got shorter, plot points barely followed through. In promos, her face was there, and then, suddenly, it wasn't. TLC stopped using her image in press. No trailers, no retweets, no push. For someone who used to drive engagement, it was like she was being photoshopped out of her own fame. People didn't realize at first. Fans just assumed she'd pop up in the next half of the season. Maybe she was on a break. But while casual watchers waited for her return, something more intentional was happening behind the scenes. This is what industry insiders call a silent disengagement. No public statement, no messy Twitter fight, no "we wish her well." Instead, networks pull the plug in slow motion. Contracts quietly lapse. Scheduled appearances get reshuffled. Legal team takes over all communication. Talent coordinators stop checking in. Producers stop calling. One day, everything stops moving forward and no one tells you why. It's not a firing in the public sense. It's a disappearing act with legal fine print behind it. And here's the chilling part. Legal experts say this kind of silence usually means lawyers are in the room and everyone is under orders not to breathe wrong. When a show intentionally says nothing, even as rumors rage, it's often not because they're clueless. It's because they physically can't say anything without putting themselves at risk. Speaking recklessly when legal matters are unresolved is a lawsuit waiting to happen. And when that silence stretches, like it did in Jasmine's case, it usually means something a lot bigger is sitting under the surface. So fans try to fill in the blanks themselves. But Jasmine's social media made that harder. She didn't clarify. She didn't deny. Instead, her posts got weirder. One day she was upbeat, posting cryptic messages about fresh starts or learning who's real. The next, she'd vanish again. For days, sometimes weeks. When she did resurface, it was with red eyes, shaky captions, half-deleted stories. There were moments where she looked close to telling the truth. Too close. And the next morning, the post would disappear. This wasn't an Instagram cleanse. This felt like someone testing the rules of what she could legally say and realizing, too late, she couldn't say much at all. By this point, TLC had gone full ghost mode. Former editors stopped mentioning her online. Cross-promotions that used to funnel views to her page shut off like someone hit a switch. Nobody said her name on camera. And when fans asked why, producers answered with the same thing over and over: no comment. Which begs a question. When a network refuses to speak on a star they once built seasons around, what exactly are they hiding from? If TLC wasn't allowed to speak, imagine what they were trying to avoid saying. Somewhere between her last filmed confessionals and her total social media collapse, something else was happening. Quietly, but dangerously. Production didn't just slow down with Jasmine. It stopped. Not delayed. Not rescheduled. Stopped. And shortly after, things reportedly moved out of the hands of producers and into the hands of lawyers. Multiple insiders have since alleged that once the cameras went down, immigration issues that were previously brushed off as temporary became big enough to trigger a full legal review. At first, it might have looked like paperwork. A missing form, an expired condition, maybe a visa not aligning with filming restrictions. That's common on a show like 90 Day Fiancé. It thrives on international couples navigating messy bureaucracies. But the difference here was speed and silence. According to people close to the situation, Jasmine's case allegedly escalated from admin concerns to something advisors flagged as serious. Fast. And once legal departments got involved, creative control was yanked. Her storyline was no longer being shaped in the editing room. It was being responded to in legal meetings. Some of those meetings, sources say, weren't about reality TV at all. They were about compliance failures. About somebody else, not TLC, taking notice. Word inside the franchise is that several contracts tied to Jasmine were immediately frozen or voided. Not because of performance, but because certain conditions like residency eligibility, travel permissions, or re-entry terms were suddenly uncertain. And when you're filming someone whose legal ability to stay in the country is under question, you don't wait for confirmation. You act like a red flag's already real. Allegedly, TLC and Sharp Entertainment began limiting exposure not for optics, but out of legal caution. Filming someone who might soon be barred from appearing on U.S. television isn't risky. It's corporate self-sabotage. Jasmine's legal situation, from what's been murmured among insiders, became so uncertain that even internal communications switched from email to lawyer-managed channels. Talent handlers were pushed aside. What once involved stylists and producers silently became a shuffle between attorneys and risk consultants. Why Jasmine's case stood out is exactly what makes the show popular. She came into 90 Day as a Panamanian girlfriend with a high-drama relationship and a storyline packed with immigration friction, cultural clashes, and emotional turmoil. That formula is the blueprint of the franchise. So why would the show back off when her drama peaked? Because, unlike other cast members, Jasmine allegedly crossed into territory that wasn't filmable. Not dramatic, not romantic, legal. There's a line between couples struggling with immigration and someone becoming the center of an actual immigration case. And this is where the whispers stop sounding like speculation and more like a quiet industry panic. Because if sources are correct, Jasmine didn't pack her bags and walk away from fame. She allegedly received formal notice, some say through attorneys, some say through enforcement channels, that staying in the U.S. was no longer an option on the table. Not under her visa conditions. Not under active review. She didn't leave because she was tired of the cameras. She left because, allegedly, she had to. And if she was removed from the country, why did no one, TLC, Jasmine, or the court, say it out loud? For someone who once lived in the spotlight like it was oxygen, Jasmine's social media turned into a ghost story. Not a dramatic meltdown. Not a fight with followers, but something far harder to pin down. Slow deletions, inconsistent captions, long silences followed by short bursts of emotion. Then, silence again. The shift didn't scream rebrand. It felt like a distress signal wrapped in a legal muzzle. Her Instagram used to be a magnet. Flashy outfits, bold statements, long captions about self-worth and jealousy and fiery love. After she started disappearing from screens, the tone flipped entirely. A post would appear about betrayal, then vanish before morning. Another would hint at feeling abandoned, emotionally used, or starting from scratch in a place that wasn't home, and hours later, gone. Screenshots began circulating on Reddit of captions that hinted at something darker, without ever saying what. Fans couldn't tell if it was mental health, heartbreak, or something else entirely. What stood out wasn't what she said. It was what she stopped saying. There were no posts correcting the rumors, no announcement about leaving the show, nothing about legal issues, or even a vague, "I'm taking a break." For someone who used to narrate her every emotion to 500,000 strangers, the total absence of clarity felt louder than any statement could have been. Her silence wasn't elegant. It was messy in the way real fear looks when you can't say what's happening. According to digital behavior analysts who track public figures under legal scrutiny, this is the exact pattern you see when public persona meets private legal lockdown. One entertainment PR expert described it bluntly. When someone trims posts within hours, shifts captions, or disappears after dropping cryptic messages, it's often not drama. It's legal advice. Especially if those posts come during periods when public contracts are being reviewed or terminated. And Jasmine's case fits that timeline. The show had gone quiet, fans were suspicious, and her social media dance looked less like someone curating a feed and more like someone trying to speak through holes in a legal wall and plugging them back up before anyone could react. The behavior wasn't strategic. It was symptomatic. Of what? Confusion, conflict, and most of all, loss of control. Because when a public figure becomes the subject of conversations they're no longer allowed to participate in, their platforms stop being tools and start looking like liabilities. A single word posted at the wrong moment can trigger consequences across contracts, court filings, or immigration reviews. That's the cost of speaking after you've been told to stop talking. And those who get that warning, you'll usually never hear them mention it. But a few cracks opened. Longtime followers noticed that Jasmine's cheerful selfies took on a haunted edge. Her styling changed, her eye contact was different. There were fewer filters, fewer bold statements, and one post, now scrubbed, said something chilling. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's protection. It barely lasted an hour. Did she try to push back? Did she try to correct the record and lose? Or worse, realize no one would speak for her, and she no longer legally could speak for herself? What if those vanishing posts were her only way to scream before someone told her to stop? The word deportation sparks images of courtroom battles, flashing headlines, viral videos from airports. But in Jasmine's case, if the allegations are true, none of that happened. There were no dramatic photos, no lawyers holding press conferences, no ICE records turned up publicly, no airport footage. Just silence. And then, absence. Multiple unofficial sources now claim Jasmine didn't just leave the U.S. quietly. She was told staying was no longer an option. One insider described it as a forced exit wrapped in friendly paperwork. Another said it wasn't voluntary, but it was carefully coordinated, the kind of exit that lets everyone involved pretend nothing happened, while closing the door behind her. No mugshots. No court dates. No trail for fans to follow. Just gone. And that's how this happens when a departure is legally sensitive. Because deportation isn't always public, sometimes it's disguised as departure. Sometimes the person agrees to leave to avoid worse legal outcomes. It's called voluntary departure, but only sounds clean. In reality, it's often negotiated under pressure. Legal teams call it risk management. But for the person leaving, it can feel like exile. For Jasmine, it was more than a relocation. It was erasure. A life she spent years building got wiped clean. Relationships. Recognition. Her shot at American reality fame. Gone in one quiet reset. No farewell post. No DMs to her biggest fan accounts. No goodbye to the people who rooted for her, or against her, or couldn't stop watching. Whether you loved her or got tired of her chaos, she disappeared without closure. And inside the industry, that silence didn't just happen on its own. Sponsorships dried up first. The brands that once lined up for her attention pipeline, beauty products, diet supplements, fashion deals, gone. The brand deals she used to gush about on her story? Stopped tagging her. Then former 90-Day alum who once bantered with her, tagged her, joked with her, suddenly stopped mentioning her. Ghosted. Posts scrubbed. Interviewers who'd planned Q&As? Quiet cancellations. PR teams didn't say why. They just moved on. And the scariest part was inside the show itself. Longtime fans noticed this. Jasmine wasn't just edited less on screen. She was removed. Replaced. Threads that hinted at her drama in earlier episodes never got resolved. It looked like producers made an active decision to treat her storyline like a liability, slicing her out as if she had never been core to the arc. No behind-the-scenes bloopers, no reference to her in the tell-all, no mention by name even when the context clearly included her. This kind of scrubbing doesn't happen unless something serious is tightly locked under contract. Reality TV doesn't waste good drama unless airing it costs more than hiding it. So, if Jasmine was forced to leave and told to stay silent, what was left behind? A fragment of a character that production couldn't explain and didn't want to. A blank page where a chaotic, captivating storyline was supposed to close. Someone America couldn't forget, disappearing like a plot leak that never aired. If she left America quietly, what was left behind in her silence? Leaving the country wasn't the end of Jasmine's story. In some ways, it was just the beginning of a quieter but more dangerous phase. Because according to those still whispering behind curtains in the reality TV machine, Jasmine didn't land softly after her alleged departure. She landed in limbo. Technically out of reach, but still under watch. Multiple sources now claim she didn't leave with clean paperwork and a green light to return. In fact, the opposite. Her exit, if it happened as described, may have come with strings, restrictions that now bar her from re-entry, maybe for years. Or permanently. It doesn't stop there. One insider close to immigration enforcement speculated that if Jasmine were to violate the terms of that departure, say by trying to return unlawfully, or even by publicly contradicting the conditions of her exit, she could face detention. Or worse, charges. That's not speculation built on drama. That's how these systems work. Immigration violations don't just roll off your record, especially if they're tied to contracts, employment disputes, or anything involving national media exposure. And while no warrant with her name has surfaced, legal analysts say it's very possible to have open administrative exposure long after you've left the U.S., especially in cases involving content distribution and visa regulation overlaps. So, why does this matter now? Because her online presence has shifted again. And it's different, tighter, less expressive. It's like watching someone still trying to maintain a version of herself, but under steady surveillance. Her captions, once raw and poetic or explosively emotional, now read like PR-tested quotes. Her personal photos, fewer, less family, less location, less life. It's not absence, it's curated ambiguity. Like someone building a wall of neutrality, because showing too much of what's real might cost more than privacy. Look closely, and you'll see the pattern. She posts vague affirmations, generic selfies, or occasional links, but very little of substance. For someone who once overshared without filter, this version of Jasmine is eerily measured. And that tells its own story. You don't silence yourself unless the cost of speaking is higher than the value of attention. This isn't about whether Jasmine was good or bad for the show, or how much of her chaos was real versus strategic. This is about what happens when you build your identity in a system that rewards emotional risk, only to be abandoned by that system the moment the legal math changes. Can anyone truly be blamed for falling inside pressure that loud, that fast? Or was she set up to detonate the way she did, only without a safety net when the collapse came? Now, she's disappeared from cast lists, ignored in franchise retrospectives, and likely hidden behind NDAs that limit what even her closest allies can say. But she hasn't gone underground. She's hovering between silence and punishment, between fame and fallout. Is she free and forgotten? Or frozen in place, waiting for a knock no one wants to hear? At this point, there is one uncomfortable question sitting under everything. Was Jasmine the architect of her own downfall? Or was she fed into a machine that was always going to chew her up once the off-camera costs got too high? The honest answer is messy. It is tempting to say she did this to herself. It is also tempting to say she was used by the show. But if you look closely at how 90 Day Fiancé runs, the truth feels closer to both at the same time. From day one, producers knew exactly what they had with her. This was not a calm, neutral personality. This was someone who loved big, hurt loud, and reacted with full volume. The show pushed those buttons. They flew her into stressful situations, put cameras on her in her worst emotional moments, highlighted her jealousy and insecurity, turned private breakdowns into season-defining scenes, and the more unhinged it looked, the better the numbers were. Critics of the franchise say this out loud. The system rewards chaos, then acts shocked when people break. When Jasmine cried over Gino sending her private pictures, when she raged over his secrets, when she spiraled about her looks, her hair, her age. Those were not just random scenes. Those were choices. Producers aired them because they knew viewers would watch, debate, drag, sympathize, all of it. That emotional explosion paid the bills. But here is where accountability kicks in. Jasmine agreed to be there. She signed contracts. She let cameras into her relationship. She said things that hurt people, including Gino, including herself. She was not a passive object. She was active, aware, and often doubled down instead of pulling back. Being emotional on TV is not a crime, but claiming no responsibility at all would be dishonest. So which is it? Victim or villain? The real problem starts when you see how early red flags were treated. Fans noticed her behavior getting more extreme. Rumors spread about production stress, money issues, and emotional instability. Yet she kept getting brought back. More seasons, more tell-alls, more dramatic cuts of her shouting, sobbing, and threatening to leave. Those issues were never slowed down. They were monetized. And as long as her drama stayed within the safe zone of entertaining crazy, nobody in power seemed to hit the brakes. Only when immigration lawyers, compliance teams, and real-world consequences started lining up did the emergency shutdown begin. Not when she was clearly breaking down emotionally, not when her relationship looked toxic on screen, but when the drama crossed into the kind of legal reality that networks do not want to touch. So yes, she played into it, but she also played a game where the rules are written to reward your worst habits until they stop being profitable. Then you are replaced, not repaired. The bigger question is ugly. Is reality TV designed for exactly this kind of collapse? To find the loudest, most unstable mix of love and pain, turn it into a brand, and then pull the plug the second lawyers start circling? Jasmine is one face in a long line of people who burned bright on this franchise, then disappeared under a cloud of speculation and silence. What if Jasmine was the test case for what happens when the chaos gets too real to air? Where is Jasmine now? For all the noise she once made, her current life is almost completely off the map. No clear address, no confirmed country. No official update from her or from anyone who paid her to share every little thing before. Fans scroll her page looking for clues and get nothing but fragments. She exists online, but not in a way that answers the one question everyone keeps asking. What actually happened to her? There is no confirmation, no denial, no statement from TLC. No interview clip where she sits on a couch and says, "Here is why I left." For a woman who once turned private moments into public content, the lack of closure feels strange, almost unnatural, and that is exactly what gets experts raising their eyebrows. Media lawyers and crisis PR people, the kind who usually stay behind the curtain, point out one pattern that matters. When one person goes quiet, that is personal. When a network, a production company, current cast members, and ex-cast all go quiet around the same person at the same time, that is not an accident. That is protection. Not the emotional kind, the legal kind. Silence becomes a shield for everyone involved. Think about the load Jasmine was carrying before this all snapped. Her identity was built on being watched. Her income depended on staying relevant. Her future was tied to immigration status and contract renewals. All of that was stacked on one unstable stage. So when the legal side collapsed, it did more than end a TV run. It hit every part of her life at once. Work, home, love, public image, all in one shot. In that situation, an implosion is not surprising. It is almost guaranteed. When your right to stay in a country, your right to work, and your entire financial survival are all wrapped around the same TV deal, one legal decision can erase you faster than any bad edit. Fans see a missing cast member. The person living it feels like their whole existence got red stamped. And still, nobody closes the book. TLC has not said her name. No one from production has stepped forward with a neat timeline. Even the harshest gossip accounts frame everything as alleged, because no one wants to poke a situation that might still be under legal review. That lack of finality is its own answer. If everything were simple, someone would have cashed in on the truth by now. So, Jasmine remains a question mark, not trending. not booked, not cleared. Her storyline on TV ended mid-arc, but her real story feels paused, not finished. Somewhere off camera, she is living the consequences of choices, contracts, and systems that were never designed to protect her long term. Whether you think she earned those consequences or was thrown into them, the result is the same. A silence that feels heavy, not peaceful. Her episode stopped airing. The franchise moved on. New couples took her slot. But looking at the trail of rumors, the legal smoke, the careful silence, you get the sense this is one story that is not fully over. It is just happening where we cannot see it. Yet. And if her true story ever leaks, it might not come from TLC. It might come from court records we have not seen yet.